Good evening. We have all worked with a student or client who has different backgrounds, cultures, and experiences from our own. But what we don't realize as DWOC consultants is how often this occurs and best practices for successfully assisting a client who has had very different life experiences, different schema, different cultures, and a different background than us. Today, I'll be discussing culturally responsive pedagogy, ways to be sensitive to diversity, how to help a student successfully create a written or oral work based on their individual schema, why practicing culturally responsive pedagogy as a DWOC consultant is important, and specific ways we can incorporate culturally responsiveness and diversity sensitivity in the DWOC space. My name is Bree Potts, and this is Being Culturally Responsive and Sensitive to Diversity as a DWOC Consultant. First, to activate our prior knowledge and get us all on the same page, take a moment to create your own definition of culturally responsive pedagogy. If you have no idea, that's totally okay, but make an educated guess. Now, I'll give you Matthew Lynch, contributor to the Huffington Post and author of What is Culturally Responsive Pedagogy's definition. Lynch says, culturally responsive pedagogy is a student-centered approach to teaching in which the students' unique cultural strengths are identified and nurtured to promote student achievement and a sense of well-being about the student's cultural place in the world. When examining our role in practicing culturally responsive pedagogy as DWOC consultants, we can examine this with a few key words from Lynch's definition of culturally responsive pedagogy. First, student-centered. As DWOC consultants, this means that we meet the student where they're at, we put their needs and goals for the session at the forefront, and we do everything in our power to help them feel successful at their task. Second, the phrase unique cultural strengths should be important to us as DWOC consultants who are trying to learn about culturally responsive pedagogy. I will be discussing schema quite a bit in this presentation, so I'd like to give a quick definition of schema. Schema are patterns of thought or behavior that help our brains categorize information and process them to create meaningful relationships. For example, if you know what a boat is when I say that word, you have schema about the word boat, and your schema help remind you of your unique experiences with a boat. To continue, using a student's unique cultural strengths means that we honor their unique experiences, their unique schema, and we help them use what is important about their culture to their advantage. Last, a key phrase from Lynch's definition of culturally responsive pedagogy that will help us as DWOC consultants to honor our students with different experiences than our own is this: promoting the well-being about the student's cultural place in the world. This means that if we do our job correctly, a student should feel heard, feel honored, feel accepted, and know that their experiences and unique cultural differences are celebrated in their writing or speaking works rather than squelched. As DWOC consultants, it's important for us to recognize that diversity is more than just race. Oftentimes in our culture, diversity is just seen as a difference in race. Based on a presentation PDF given out to participants at Doreen Fick's presentation published on Psych Health Roanoke's website, diversity is defined as a difference in race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, or other ideologies. Fick goes on to explain that diversity is exploration of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. Isn't this exactly what we want to do as DWOC consultants? Don't we strive to ensure that clients can explore their own writing and speaking in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment? Sensitivity to diversity is not just being sensitive to the differences people experience when they have a different skin color than us. Sensitivity to diversity encompasses differences in ability, age, gender, sexual orientation, and much more. If a client comes in carrying the fear that they will be judged or not given fair opportunities in the DWOC because of their diverse background in academic ability, age, gender, race, or sexual orientation, the session could be over before it even begins. It's our job to ensure that we are educated on all of the ways that humans can be diverse. By knowing that each way a person is diverse or different than us signals a different life experience, we can be more understanding, less judgmental, and more open to helping them in the way they may need assistance rather than how we want to assist them. A resource posted to ubwp.buffalo.edu shows ways that we can be sensitive to diversity in general, and then gives more specific ways based on the subgroup of diversity. It states, get to know resources that support minority groups on campus. Provide this information to members in your organization. This is a great call to action for DWOC consultants. By understanding the groups on campus who can support diverse populations, we are more apt to give these resources out to students in need. So, you're probably asking, why is all of this information important to DWOC consultants? And if you aren't using your metacognitive skills and asking yourself that, I'll still tell you anyways. As DWOC consultants at Mount Union, we work with a very diverse student population in terms of race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, gender, and ability. Almost every time a client steps into our space, they are someone who has a completely different schema, experiences, strengths, needs, and fears than us. Understanding how to use culturally responsive pedagogy and how to be sensitive to diversity is a huge part of our job. It can determine whether a student will leave the DWOC feeling successful and heard or defeated and undervalued. Understanding that diversity is more than just what we can see is a huge part of our job. Each time a student walks into the DWOC space, we have to understand that they are coming with their own set of schema and experiences that we may not be able to understand. Their schema and experiences could be the vehicle for a part of their writing, speaking, or behavior that we also may not understand. As consultants, we have to be able to evaluate how a client's differing experiences and background are playing into their writing, speaking, or behavior, and be extremely sensitive to that. Rafoth, the author of A Tutor's Guide, Helping Writers One-to-One, examines how tutors can help clients when the duo is crossing cultural barriers. Rafoth states, when discussing an example assignment giving to students, that these writing assignments automatically assume that students' familiarity with the U.S. educational system based on a presumed 12+ years of attending U.S. schools. Although this quote is discussing the ways international students can be the victim of cultural barriers, this quote does apply to us as DWOC consultants. This quote explains that international students may not have the correct schema to complete an assignment about U.S. schools. This is important to note if we're working with international students. But in this case, when we're discussing ways to use what we've learned thus far in the presentation in the DWOC space, this quote serves another purpose. This is a prime example of an instance where a student didn't have the proper schema to complete the assignment. Some of our clients may come to the DWOC without the schema of writing academically. They may not have the schema about citations, grammar, sentence structure, proper paragraph structure, or even the topic they have to write or speak on. It's important for us to use the information we've learned today in the DWOC to ensure that we don't assume that a client has the schema we might think they have. This is not an error for them, it just means that we have to be sensitive and use their cultural schema to their advantage. Lastly, let's discuss tangible ways to help put all of this to use in the DWOC space. In the article, 3 Ways to Become a Culturally Responsive Teacher, Matthew Lynch discusses 3 main strategies to put all of the information about culturally responsive pedagogy and cultural sensitivity to use in the DWOC space. Lynch states that these 3 tangible ways to become a more culturally responsive teacher, in our case consultant, are: teachers or consultants, knock down your own biases first. Second, take a deeper look into the culture of your students or clients. And third, consider how cultural differences could affect performance. First, by knocking down our own biases about race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender, age, or other differences, we are able to better serve the people we are working with. This is not an overnight switch. Biases are built into us and our culture from the moment we're born. This requires a cognitive effort to first identify the bias, and second, determine why this bias is completely not conducive to being a DWOC consultant who practices culturally responsive pedagogy. Second, taking a deeper look into the culture of our clients can help use the culturally responsive pedagogy skill of using their unique culture or differences to their advantage in their speaking or writing. Obviously, we cannot ask a client, "Hey, what's your culture?" or "Hey, why are you different than me?" in a session. But by asking inquisitive and respectful questions, we can find more out about our clients. This may work better with a client that you work with over time or a client who continually comes back to you for sessions, but it's a great start to get to know our clients better and understand who they are as writers and speakers. And last, understanding how cultural differences could affect academic performance helps us understand where a client's deficits may lie. As a special educator, when we write IEPs, we have to ask ourselves if the child's deficit could be because of a cultural difference. If we just assume that a client doesn't understand conventions or spelling because of their IQ, we may be missing a cultural differences that could unlock a world of possibilities for that client or student. In conclusion, we learned about culturally responsive pedagogy, how to be sensitive to diversity, the definition of culturally responsive pedagogy and diversity, why it's important to us as DWAC consultants, and ways we can actually start to use culturally responsive pedagogy in the DWAC space. As you move on from tonight's presentation, I challenge you to remember that each person coming into the DWAC space comes with their own set of strengths, weaknesses, diverse backgrounds, and experiences that differ from our own. I challenge you in your next session to help a student capitalize on their own unique schema to become the best writer or speaker they can be. Thank you.